woke up today just so excited about life, excited about the future, excited about all the possibilities. And one of the reasons for that is that one of the things that I've discovered in my life is that there's a lot of things I know how to do. Have you figured that out? There are things you know how to do. There are things that other people may not know how to do that you know how to do that look really hard, but they're easy for you. And sometimes we step into those spaces and we reaffirm how awesome we are. Look, I did that. And every once in a while, you get a challenge so big that you know it's bigger than you. And in fact, you know you are destined for failure. I'm in one of those moments. I'm in one of those moments in my life where I stepped into something that I know is bigger than me. I'm facing a challenge that I know is impossible for me. In fact, I know that unless God shows up in my life, I'm going to be a public failure, drowning in humiliation. It's one of the most exciting moments in my life. It's because it's in those moments that you realize that we have the capacity to affect change. That somehow in the most extraordinary ways, humans are designed to create futures. And that's what I really want to focus on today. Because you may not really understand how the future happens, and maybe you have a more superstitious view of the future. And we add God language to our superstitions. We go, the future just happens, or the future's just in God's hands, or the future's in God's control, and I don't have any control over that. That must have been what God wanted to have happen. But I want you to realize that you're designed by God to create futures. And even if you're here and you don't believe in God, think about this just for a moment. Of all the species on the planet, we're the only species that can affect the future. No matter how much you love and admire animals, porpoises cannot change the reality of their context. Whether you love horses or porcupines, they can never make a choice that creates a different future. So if we're just a more advanced expression of all the species on this planet, how in the world is it possible? How did it happen that humans can actually create futures? And in fact, not only can we create a future for ourselves, but we create a future that impacts everyone else. It not only impacts humanity, it impacts every other species on this planet. The entire planet is dependent on the choices we make. The fish that swim in the ocean and the birds that fly in the air and all the creatures that walk on the ground are at the mercy of the choices we make. And yet sometimes we act as if the future is so mysterious and uncertain and outside of our realm of impact. But I want you to understand that right now someone's creating a future that you will live in. That someone's impacting the future that you will have to step into. And so the question really isn't, can humans create futures? The question is, what kind of future will you create? So what I want you to see with me today, that the future belongs to the bold. The future belongs to women and men who have the courage to create what they could only imagine. And I'll say this 1,000 times over again, the future awaits those with the courage to create it. So I want us to go back to these words from Solomon in Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Because Solomon had this brilliant ability to connect the dots, to take us to that place, that intersection in the present from which the future is created. And I want to take you to a passage of scripture that can be easily overlooked or misunderstood or not understood at all. Because even though the principles that Solomon gives us are timeless, his metaphors and images are time-dated. So sometimes what he says can seem disconnected from our reality. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, beginning in verse 1, Solomon writes these words: "Ship your grain across the sea. After many days you will receive a return. Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. If clouds are full of water, they pour rain on the earth. Whether a tree falls to the north or to the south, in the place where it falls, there it will lie. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap." Now, I know just reading that has made everything clear to you. You already know, I get it. I see this. You don't even need to expand on this. But I want you to see that in these images, Solomon's actually giving us insight to the choices we need to make to create the future we long for. And you have within you the capacity to affect the future, to create a future. The question is not whether you're capable of it. You're designed for it. The question is whether you will step into it and find the resolve, the courage, the faith to create what only God could imagine. So he begins by saying, ship your grain across the sea. After many days, you will receive a return. Well, obviously, all of us have that experience all the time. We're always putting our grain on ships and sending it overseas. And so we know right away what the implications of this, and what even makes it a little more confusing, if it's not already a little obscure, is that these same Hebrew words can be translated very differently. They can actually be translated, cast your bread upon the waters, and after a season they will give you a return. And so maybe you can see the connection between put your grain on the ship and send it to sea, and cast your bread upon the waters. But a more clear translation simply translates like this: be generous, and someday you will be rewarded. And so what I want to begin with is what Solomon is actually saying. What he's saying to us is the future belongs to the bold, so you need to do as much good as you can. So you're designed in such a way that everything you have is now a stewardship in your life. So why does he use this metaphor? Well, because he's telling us that what we have, the grains we have, we need to, in a sense, put it on a ship and send it to sea. Now, remember, their understanding of the sea was different than ours. We can fly across the world now. You can be in London overnight. You can be in Sydney in just a bit more time. You can go to Tokyo or to India and cross every ocean. There's no ocean on this planet we cannot cross in a day's time virtually. But in the time of Solomon, if you put your grain on a ship and you sent it out to sea, that ship would go past the horizon and you would never know if that ship would return. There were places where the ships would go where men had never ventured. There were even mythologies of sea monsters and dragons that inhabited the waters, and they thought that the volatility of the sea was more than most could overcome. So you need to take the chance of taking what you have and sending it so far away to do good that you have no guarantee of return. So what he's actually telling us is that we need to have a generous spirit. And in fact, every interpretation of this particular passage for the first 1,000+ years was that Solomon is saying we need to learn to be generous with what we have. So however it was translated, they always understood that God was trying to create a culture of generosity, or in fact, a race of generosity. Humanity, not a color, but a human race that took from what we had and did not think it was all for us, but knew it was a stewardship to us to do more. He says, and after many days, there's the phrase, after many days, not after a couple of days, but after many days. In other words, we don't know how many days. It could be so many days. Those days turn to weeks, and those days turn to months, and those days turn to years, and maybe even those days might turn into lifetimes, but after many days, you'll receive a return. You need to live your life knowing that when you choose to live a life of generosity, that you're actually creating momentum in the universe, and that it will return to you good. Last week, and whenever I say last week, I mean any time in the past. Because I have no sense of chronology. Everyone who knows me knows it's true. Even Aaron has said to me, Dad, I'm 29. When you talk about me, you act like I'm 12. It's because it just happened last week. So last week, and I actually think it might have been last week, but that's how I remember it. There was a man who came here. Was it last week, Joe? It was last week. Like I said, it was last week, and I was outside, and this man came up. He might have been my age. He might have been around 60 years old, and he flew in from Houston to come to Mosaic. He said, my life has been impacted by the podcast, by the culture, the teaching of Mosaic. It's changed my life, and I consider myself a part of this community, even though I live in Houston. He goes, and I've been in the petroleum business all my life. And I have a vision. I want to put Mosaic's live stream and podcast on every oil rigger in the world. Because I know how isolated and alone the women and men who work on those rigs are. And I know how disconnected they are. So I have a vision to put what is happening here on every oil rigger on the planet. And I just want permission. I just want to make sure it's okay. We're like, go for it. And I thought he was going to maybe ask for funding. He goes, so here, and he hands me a check, which I do not recommend. Hand it to Pastor Joe. Do not hand it to me. But he handed me a check for $10,000. He said, by the way, I'm a part of this community, so this is my tithe. And it's the first of many to come. And this is amazing. See, we've been putting our grains on ships and sending it out to sea. We have been taking what God has been doing in us and doing for us, and we've been giving it away to the world. And we never thought we'd get it back. We didn't know where it was going, how it would impact. We just knew that if we did good, it would cause more good to happen across the world. But I want you to know Solomon was right, because he says, after many days, you may receive a return. And over again, I've seen us pour into people and send things out, whether it's Malawi or Bangladesh or India. And we have a team that's going to Puerto Rico because they've been devastated by a natural disaster, and there's been so little relief. And we have people in our community for Puerto Rico, so we're going to go and do something, because we're going to put our grain on the ship and send it out to sea. And we can't do it thinking, oh, this is what we're going to get back. That's an investment. Now, investments are not wrong. They're not bad. But when you're investing, it's not the same as generosity. Generosity is a commitment to send it on the ship past the horizon, saying to God, I'm doing good with no expectation of return. Because I believe in this principle that you've created the universe, that when I do good, it causes good to return. After many days, you may receive a return. So let me ask you, are you doing as much good as you can? See, I hear people all the time say, well, it's not making a difference. I hear people critique what other people do all the time. Well, they don't have the right strategy. Or I remember when the Red campaign came out. I remember when Bono was trying to do so much good dealing with poverty. Everybody was just critiquing his plan and critiquing his strategy and saying how it doesn't work. And you know what I find? The people who critique what other people are doing are usually doing nothing. And so let's just say up front, we can't solve every problem. We may not be able to impact all the problems in the world, but just because you can't fix everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. So what's the good you're doing right now? Are you committed in your life to do the most good you can? And as a community, I remember when we made the hard decisions of investing so much of our resources in our live stream and our podcast, thinking it's so much money, so much work, so much effort. And you know what drives me crazy? We get complaints all the time. We do the live stream for free, we do the podcast for free, and we get people saying, well, you know, the sound isn't great. Well, you know, you could really improve the quality of the picture. Well, sometimes we don't have the podcast. They go, where's the podcast? I get emails. I get Twitter updates. Where's the podcast? I haven't had the podcast in 3 weeks. What's going on? I've gotten emails, people angry with me, going, it's free. We put our grain on a ship, send it across the sea. You've been consuming what we've been giving, so stop complaining. That's just a side note. Are you doing as much good as you can? Maybe we can't do all the good that needs to be done, but we can do some of the good. And then he goes on to say, invest in 7 ventures, yes, and 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon your land. I love that. That's so optimistic. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. Before I explain what he means, let's just pause there for a minute. He doesn't say, you do not know if disaster will come upon your land. He says, you don't know when or what disaster will come upon. In other words, do you want a little more certainty about the future? Some of you here are paralyzed. I just get nervous. I'm paralyzed because the future is so uncertain. I need some certainty. Here's some certainty. Disaster's coming. Do you feel better? Now that you know? You don't know what kind of disaster, but it's coming. So invest in 7 ventures, yes, and 8. I think it's amazing that Solomon is giving us a principle that's used all the time now in investment banking. If any of you have actually started thinking through your retirement, I know a lot of you are only like 12, so you're not really thinking that through yet, but when you turn 15, some of you, and you start thinking about retirement and planning for the future, if you have a portfolio, they will tell you you need to diversify your investments. And the shrewdest investments are the ones that are not connected to the same economic dynamics. And so you may have one investment that does well when real estate is doing well, and one that is affected completely by real estate. You may have one that's affected by certain aspects of the economy and others that are not affected by that aspect of the economy. You diversify your portfolio, and that idea did not come from Wall Street. That idea came from Solomon. Thousands and thousands of years ago, God gave him the wisdom to invest in multiple ventures. In 7, yes, even 8. In other words, as many as you can. You do not know what disaster may come upon your land, so take as much ground as you can. You want to know who the future belongs to? It belongs to the bold because they take all the ground they can. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're not hoping the one thing they're doing is enough. And there's some of you here, you're playing life so safe. You're living only one life at a time. What a waste of a life. You can live multiple lives at one time. You don't have to just be good at one thing. You can be good at a lot of things. You can be a great husband and a great father, by the way. You can be a great employee and a great employer. You can be great at making money and great at having relationships. You don't have to say, well, I just have to pick one over the other. You need to make sure you diversify your human portfolio, because you never know what disaster may come. And I started thinking about how when we were thinking through Mosaic and our future strategies, one of the wisest, most insightful people I know said to me, hey, you might want to just start with one at a time. Just start one campus and really build that, and then do another one. And so we decided to start multiple. And it's been exciting. We don't even know how to make Hollywood work, so we opened up South Pasadena. Because the Rialto Theater was available, but it wasn't available until we asked for it. And then because we started the Rialto, we thought, let's go ahead and start Santa Monica and Venice Beach. Let's just go in that direction too. And then while we're doing Santa Monica and Venice Beach, one of our campus pastors, Emerson Nawani, decided it was the right time, and so we sent him to Mexico City. Because we're going to invest in 7 ventures. We're not even getting started yet. Maybe 8. So we have Hollywood and South Pass and Santa Monica and Mexico City, and who knows, maybe it's Tokyo or Paris or wherever else, Buenos Aires, who knows where we're going. But we're going to invest in multiple ventures. But you know what really struck me? When it says invest in 7 ventures, yes, and 8, and when he says take as much ground as you can, it struck me that it's not really even for us about the campuses. See, because it's been a great month. It's been a crazy month. We're taking on the impossible. We sent that email to the owner of the Rialto Theater. He should not have been interested in selling. But suddenly he decided, okay, I'll sell to you guys. And so he says, yeah, I'll sell. And it's going for millions and millions of dollars. And I said, okay, we're going to buy it. And then it occurred to me, if he'll sell, how can we buy something in South Pasadena and not buy this? So I sent an email to the owner of this property in New York, to Jamie LaFrac, and I said, hey, Jamie, would you be willing to sell us this property? He responded within 2 or 3 minutes and said, he gave me a lot to chew on. Can you afford it? Before I do all the due diligence, can you afford it? And I had a moment. I started thinking about my income. I can't afford it. I started thinking about your income. Well, they can't afford it. So I said yes. Because we're not supposed to make decisions based on our income and our capacity and our ability. Because we have a secret weapon. It's God. And God can't afford it. In fact, it's more like a tip for God. So I thought, we need to take as much ground as we can. But here's the beautiful thing. This ground is only going to happen if we take the right ground. See, God's most passionate venture is the human heart. I realize, we're investing not just in 7, maybe 8. We're investing in thousands upon thousands, because every one of you whose life we pour into, every single one of you that we invest in, you are our venture. You are our future. You are what we're banking on. We don't even understand all the resources that are available because God places them inside of people. I started thinking about how crazy it is that we don't even know all the people that God has waiting to step in. See, we sent a ship a long time ago with grain, and it went across the horizon, and we forgot all about it, but they didn't forget. I think this is a moment where God is calling out all the ground we've taken across the world. I think there are people right now who don't actually even believe in God, much less Jesus, who have spent their life accumulating massive wealth, millions if not billions. And God is about to take them into a place they never expected to go. And they're gonna have a life-changing encounter with Jesus. It's gonna change their life. And they thought they were accumulating all that wealth for themselves, so they could buy one more house or one more plane or one more building or one more this. But God was actually letting them accumulate all that wealth so that one day they would become his capital building program. Because he placed in them the future that they didn't even see yet. But on a personal level, are you taking all the ground you can? Or are you sitting back and letting other people do the hard work of your life? See, have you been satisfied? Have you justified in your mind, well, I'm doing the best I can? See, if you're doing the best you can, you're still not living the life you're created to live. You're supposed to be doing better than you can. You're supposed to be living a life that can only be explained by the presence and power of Jesus in your life. I don't want to live a life that's the best I can do. I don't want to take all the ground I can take. I want to live my life in such a way that I know I've taken ground that was impossible for me to take, so that I become proof of God. And then he goes on and says, if clouds are full of water, they pour rain on the earth. I know. It's so obvious. It's self-explanatory, of course. Like, Solomon, tell me something I don't know. If clouds are full of water, they pour rain on the earth. What does this have to do with anything, Solomon? See, what Solomon is doing is he's destroying our superstitious relationship to the future. See, I think a lot of us think rain just comes. Some of us still believe in magic. Look, the rain is coming. You don't understand that Solomon understood that the rain only comes because the cloud is full of water. And in fact, my understanding is that there is more moisture in the atmosphere than there is in the ocean. But there are clouds that never bring rain. If you're from Seattle, you only know clouds that bring rain. And if you're from LA, you're wondering, what's the cloud? But I do know that there are some clouds that do not have within them the capacity and the right formula to produce rain. So you're supposed to produce rain. Your life does produce rain. And you may be wondering, where did the rain come from? And the rain you produce is the result of the water that you carry. And those who create the future understand that if you want something to come out of you, you have to get it into you. That only what you have in you comes out of you. See, it's what you contain that you reign. And there's some of you who would never say, you know, rain only comes from clouds with water. But you would say something like this: how did I get here? How did this happen to me? I never thought this would be my life. Have you ever used language that's so passive that it's almost like your life happened to you? See, that's you thinking that clouds rain without water. Let me tell you how your life happened. You chose it. You want to know how you got to where you are right now? You walked there. You want to know what kind of world you're creating? It's a world that reflects the world you're carrying within you. See, I hear people complain all the time about all the violence in the world and all the injustice in the world and all the racism in the world and all the greed in the world. But we don't do anything to change what's going on because the change that has to happen out there can only begin in here. And so if you're filled with bitterness and jealousy and greed and anger, all you will produce is acid rain, and you will scorch everything you touch. If the clouds are full of water, what are you full of? What are you raining on the earth? Or are you just one of those pretty clouds against a blue sky that actually produces no rain at all? So I decided I'm going to be full of rain. In fact, I feel it. I have density. And by the way, an interesting side note, the word in the Bible, glory, it actually means density, like a cloud full of water, ready to rain. See, I think God is looking for men and women who will allow themselves to be full of what God wants to rain on humanity. And the scriptures tell us that God rains on the righteous and the unrighteous. So if it's inside of you, it will rain on everyone, whether they believe in God or not, whether they agree with you or not. See, there's some of you, you're just empty clouds right now, or just passing acid rain into the world, and you don't realize what's going on inside of you. It's because you're filled with bitterness and anger and fear and guilt and shame and jealousy and greed, and it leaves you fragile and broken. See, those human characteristics do not make you strong. They make you feel strong, but they leave you shattered and broken. You want to know what makes you strong? Love makes you strong. See, hope makes you resilient. Courage makes you unstoppable. Faith transforms your life. What are you full of right now? I've just said, I'm going to be full of faith. I'm going to rain on you, faith, right now. Can you feel it? There's some of you came in here filled with despair and hopelessness. I just said, I'm going to be so full of hope that I have more than I can carry for myself. I'm going to pour it into your life. There's so many of us, we just want to be little clouds. See, clouds never fulfill their greatest capacity, the greatest function, the greatest intention if they just hold the water to themselves. That water is supposed to be a gift to the earth. See, you know how you know you're full of love? It's because you keep raining love on other people. The way you know you're full of hope is you keep bringing hope to other people. The way you know that you're full of compassion and kindness is that you keep giving compassion and kindness to other people. The way you know that your heart is full of generosity is that you keep giving more than you take. Because you're a cloud full of water. You can't help but rain. You cannot contain it. I think God is looking for people who will be full of courage and faith and full of grace and compassion, full of generosity, so they can reign on this earth that's dying in a barren land. And then Solomon says, whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there it will lie. Drop the mic. Right? We should probably just skip that one because everyone gets that one. I mean, have you ever this happens so many times, right? You get up, you go get coffee, you go sit down, get a little, Americano, go get them. And you just start thinking, right? Reflecting on the big issues of life. And then you think to yourself, when a tree falls to the north or to the south, either, where it falls, that's where it lies. It explains everything. It explains everything in life. In fact, tomorrow when you go to work, and someone seems a little distressed, or your boss asks you something that you don't have an answer for, or if you're married and your wife says, "Why'd you do that?" or "What were you thinking?" You just look at them. If a tree falls to the north or to the south, where it falls. That's where it lies. And you just walk away like it's so obvious they wouldn't dare ask for an explanation. Thank you, Solomon, for telling me something not only that I already know, but I didn't need to know it before you reminded me of it. Because where trees fall have no effect on my life. Well, unless, of course, I decide to leave a mark in the world. And I want to be a part of creating the future. See, what Solomon is actually saying is trees don't fall in a direction by accident. They fall where they've been designed to break and fall. See, in my brief career as a lumberjack, you laugh, it's true. It was brief. And they had to teach me how to cut that tree so it wouldn't fall on the trucks. They had to teach me how to cut that tree so it wouldn't fall on me. They had to teach me how to cut that tree so it would not be life-threatening to all the other lumberjacks who were cutting down trees. See, when you're skilled at this, you know how to cut away at the tree, and it falls exactly in the direction that you decide. See, some of you, your life is not going in the direction you wanted it to go. You don't know how you got here. You don't know how this happened to you. You don't know how this became your life. And the fact that you don't know means you can't fix it. The tree of your life, it fell in a certain direction because of the choices you've made in your life. It's lying where it is because that's where you chose for it to fall. And here's I think that the tragedy of it all is that you may not even have understood that as you're cutting and cutting and choosing and deciding and acting and living, that you were actually deciding which direction that tree would fall. There's some of you here that everything you say is, I want to live a life that reflects God. I want to live a life that God created me to live. But you keep making choices that cause a tree to fall in the other direction. Stop acting like it's God's fault that he's not coming through. Stop acting like God has let you down. Your tree is falling south because you made choices that make your tree go south. And if you want your tree to go north, you're going to have to start making new choices in your life. See, the people who change the world, the people who create the future, the ones who are bold enough to create the future, they decide where they will leave their mark. And you need to decide where you're going to leave your mark. What do you want to be remembered for? What kind of impact are you going to make in the world? When I was thinking about this, I thought about the word epitaph. So I thought, I wonder if the word epitaph has some really significant meaning in its etymology. So I looked it up, and it means over the ground. Nothing significant. It's just the marker over the ground where your life lays last. That says a brief statement of which direction your tree fell. I've been to too many funerals in my life where the entire ceremony was lying about the person who died so that they could be well remembered. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person you have to make things up about and you have to cover things up about so that the people in the room can feel good about the life I didn't live. How will you be remembered? Where will your tree fall? It's going to fall where you choose. In the place where it falls, there it will lie. Don't become angry with God if your life goes in a direction you never wanted, because it was the direction you chose. He's trying to strip away all the superstition, all the mythology, all the magic in our thinking. I cannot tell you how many times I hear people use language like, we know it's just God's will. It's just what God wanted. I'm gonna go, no! You're not listening. Didn't you hear God go, don't chop there? going to fall in the wrong direction. Some of you, your tree is falling in the wrong direction, and it's going backwards, and you're going to be trapped in your past rather than forward and creating your future. And I am so grateful for a God who can bring such a powerful wind that it can change the course of where my tree is falling and set it straight again. I was at this event this weekend, and someone asked me what I thought was a strange question. They said, Erwin, of all the things you've done in your life, what do you want to be remembered for? And I looked at him and I said, is it a trick question? He goes, no, what do you want to be? I said, well, I want to be remembered for bringing as many people to the God who loves them, to a life-changing relationship with Jesus. What do you mean? What do I want to be remembered for? I want to do a lot of things. I love so many things, but I want to be remembered for one particular mark. See, I've already decided what mark I want to make in the world. My mark is the cross. My mark is Jesus. My mark is the church. My mark is what Jesus died for and rose from the dead for. And it wasn't an easy decision to make. Because I think there's something inside of us all that wants us to sort of make our mark. See, my goal in life isn't for people to remember my mark. My goal in life is for people to never forget the mark that Jesus made. And there's some of us here, we keep trying to make our own mark individually, personally, so that we can be remembered. Have you ever heard that phrase? I think it's kind of epic. You live as long as the last person who remembers you lives. Such a great line, right? And I was like, no! What about if when they all die? Then I stop existing. And then I had this thought, I'm already in the mind of God. God will never forget me. If I live as long as I am remembered, then I have eternity ahead of me, because God will never forget me. And I want you to know something. When you decide to make your mark, living a life defined by Him, when you allow His life to become your life, your mark will last for eternity. And then He says, whoever watches the wind will not plant, and whoever looks at the cloud will not reap. And I know in a room full of farmers and agricultural specialists, this is so obvious. But for those of us who didn't grow up on the farm, like my wife Kim, for those of us who thought that vegetables came from cans, and who can't understand how tomatoes are actually fruit. See, what Solomon is saying, see, there are some people who never plant because they just keep looking at the wind. They go, it's too windy today, so I'm not going to plant seeds. Not a good day to get to work. Oh, it's not windy enough. The sun will scorch the seeds and it won't spread them out properly. It's not the right day to get to work. Because then others, they look at the clouds, and so they never reap. They have a harvest, and that harvest has an expiration date. If you don't reap the harvest at the right time, it rots and spoils and becomes worthless. He said that there's some, instead of reaping, they look at the clouds and they say, it's going to rain today. Can't reap. Oh, there are no clouds. Too hot today, can't reap. There's some people who keep looking at the wind so they never sow, and they keep looking at the clouds so they never reap. They keep looking for every excuse from living the life that God created them to live. So stop looking for excuses and waiting for the perfect time. So he's saying what you need to do is stop looking at the wind and stop looking at the clouds and look at the opportunity right in front of you. There's some of you who just keep waiting for that break. Waiting for your life to take that turn. You keep waiting for that opportune moment. There's a moment when you're going to be all in. You're going to really give yourself. There's that moment when you finally get that opportunity you're waiting for. You're going to really sacrifice. That's when you're going to be determined. That's when you're going to pay the price. That's when you're going to be courageous. But that moment's never going to come. Because you just keep looking at the wind and looking at the clouds and just waiting around, using everything as an excuse to live a lesser life than God created you to live. And it's the same way with God. It's amazing how many people, one day, I'm gonna cross that line of faith and trust Jesus with everything, just not today. One day I'm gonna take this faith and it's gonna be more than just talk, it's gonna be action, it's gonna be walk, but not today. One day I'm gonna trust Jesus with every aspect of my life. I'm gonna trust Jesus with my relationships. I'm not gonna be afraid of being alone because I'm gonna trust God. He's gonna bring the right person into my life. One day I'm gonna trust God with my money. not today. But one day I'm gonna believe that God is more generous than I could ever be, but not today. One day. I'm gonna stop drifting around, living my life with no intention or purpose. One day I'm gonna actually take on God's calling in my life, but not today. There's some of you just keep looking at the wind and looking at the clouds, and what Solomon is saying, stop looking for excuses and waiting for the perfect time, and get in the game and act and be bold, because the future belongs to the bold. I just want to close with this thought. I have a friend who I've known for a few years, and he's young. He's only 31. I met his family in a far-off country, small little out-of-the-way place. When he was in his 20s, he started a company, and he's had an idea how to serve people, and it did well. But his life was just so full of pain and tragedy. More pain than a human being deserves to experience in 30 years of life. Trying to live a life that honors God and be faithful, to live a life where his character reflects Jesus. And you'd think that those would sort of insulate you from horrific pain and disappointment, but they don't. And honestly, there are times that I don't know how he's hung in there. I don't know how he didn't become bitter or angry or just walk away from his faith, but he just never did. And last week he sent a note saying, hey, I've sold my part in the company I started, and he doesn't even live here. He doesn't even go to Mosaic. He's connected to us through the live stream and podcasts, and he's a part of our global community where we've been sending grain on ships into the sea. And he said, hey, I'd like to give a gift to the church because I heard you guys are going to buy property, and I just want to be a part of this. And he said, I'm going to give $400,000. I mean, he's only 31. One day he'll be able to do more, but he's an underachieving millennial who starts a company that surpasses $1 billion of worth. People speak so badly about your generation. You guys, they don't even know what's coming. They don't know what's coming. So when I heard that he wanted to give that kind of gift, I gave him a call. I thought I should call him. And I said, hey, why don't you come down to LA and we just spend some time together? And he goes, when? And I said, how about Monday? He goes, okay. And so he flew down to have dinner on Monday. And I said, hey, have you ever seen the coast up Santa Monica, Malibu? He goes, no, I've never seen the ocean over here. And so we drove over to Santa Monica and drove up to Malibu, and we had lunch together, and he was going to catch a flight that night. And as we spent the day together, he said, my greatest fear is not being a good steward of the money that God has entrusted me with. Every dollar I give, it has to have significance. It has to go to the right place. And so when I give this kind of money to Mosaic, it's because I believe in what God is doing here. I believe in you guys. So beautiful. And as happens sometimes, when the night was over, he decided not to give $400,000. He decided to give $500,000. And he looked at me and he said, hey, I said, how old are you? And he said, 31. I thought, wow, what are you going to be able to do when you grow up? And he looked at me and goes, I'm going to take a little time off, like 6 months. And then next year, I'm going to start another company. He said, the next company is going to be bigger than this one. Because it has to be. Because I have to be able to do more good in the world. thought, what would happen if we stopped looking at the wind and stopped looking at the clouds and just finally said, God, how much could you do with me? So there's some of you, you've been thinking too little of God because you've been thinking too little of yourself. And there's some of you here, you're 23, 24, 25, 27, 28, 29. There's some of you here, you don't even know it. We're not investing in you for today. We're investing in you because 10, 15, 20 years from now, you're going to be positioned to make such a huge difference in the world. And I want to make sure you never forget. You never forget that the future belongs to the bold. God created you to create. So stop running from your responsibility. Stop running from the privilege God has given you. Inside of you is where the future begins. That's why it's so important to get Jesus inside of you. Because when you connect to the God who is the source of everything good and beautiful and true, now all that is good and beautiful and true dwells within you, and you are a cloud filled with that beauty and that goodness and that wonder. And there's some of you here right now, what you need to do in this moment, not one day, today, this day, this moment, is cross the line of faith and give your life to Jesus, to receive his forgiveness, to receive his life in you. Would you just bow your heads with me just for a moment? Just close your eyes. If you're here in this moment and you're ready to cross the line of faith and give your life to Jesus, I want to lead you in a simple prayer, just one sentence. Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. It's not everything you and God need to talk about. It's the beginning of the conversation. But if you will give Jesus your life, he will put his life in you right now. You will belong to him. He will never leave you or abandon you. New life, new beginning, new futures will happen right now. Right now, just whisper this prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. Right now, just whisper this prayer to him. Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. If this is your prayer right now, this is your moment, if this is your today, this is the moment your future begins anew. If this is your prayer, I want to pray for you. I want you right now just to hold your hand up high and say, yes, I just prayed this prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. If that's you, right now, just hold up your hand high. I want to see you wherever you are. Beautiful. Anyone else? Beautiful. Anyone else right now? Beautiful. Anyone else? Jesus, I give you my life. Right now, just hold it up high. I want to see you. Wonderful. So good. Anyone else right now? Beautiful. Jesus, I give you my life. I see you in the back, you guys over there. Anyone else right now? Jesus, I give you my life. Beautiful. Father, I thank you for the women and men in this room who've opened up their life to you, who've crossed the line of faith and said, Jesus, I give you my life. I pray that right now you just wrap them up in your love. Let them know they belong to you. This is the beginning of new things. The beginning of new things. I thank you, Father, for their new life in Jesus. And we pray in your name. Amen. Can we just thank God for all those who respond to him even now? So good. So good.